a large number of mysterious spheres suddenly crashed down onto the school. Countless students had their limbs severed or their chests pierced, and the military commander actually ran away alone. However, a small monster suddenly crawled onto the glass, causing the commander to roll over his vehicle and be brutally dismembered by the monster. In addition to these small monsters, there were also larger individuals. Moreover, they were invulnerable to swords and guns. After being attacked by high firepower weapons, they would turn into a group of small monsters. No one knew where the monsters came from or how to defeat them, only know that a year ago, except for the polar regions, hundreds of mysterious spheres suddenly appeared. In the skies of other parts of the world, the South Korean government decided to send the military to attack those spheres, but who could have expected that? Human weapons not only failed to shatter the spheres, but instead made them split rapidly. Soon, the spheres spread all over the world. Since then, humans hadn't dared to act rashly. Fortunately, the spheres didn't do anything to harm humans either. In this way, humans lived in fear and coexisted with the spheres for a year. However, an accident 2 weeks ago completely shattered this tranquility. A sphere in the sky above South Korea fell to the ground. The military immediately rushed over and surrounded the scene tightly. In order to figure out what was inside the sphere, the commander fired at the sphere with a rifle. However, the sphere didn't show any reaction at all. Then he asked the soldiers to attack with rocket launchers. The explosion kicked up clouds of dust, but there was smoke and no harm. When the smoke cleared, people found that there was a strange purple light inside the sphere. There were also bursts of roaring sounds. It was as if some terrifying creature had been awakened. The Minister of National Defense immediately issued a national mobilization order, announcing that the country was in a state of emergency. All citizens over the age of 24, and all seniors in high school had to join the army. The military thought that as long as they said that participating in the conscription would add points to the college entrance examination, those seniors in high school would definitely scramble to sign up, like they were grabbing treasures. As soon as these words were spoken, the classroom immediately turned into chaos. The Ministry of National Defense concealed the secret that the spheres had started attacking humans. Before the classmates could come to their senses, the soldiers had already arrived in the classroom. Instructor George made a brief self-introduction, then he talked about the training plan for the next few weeks. From now on, the class would be led by the monitor. John, who was sitting in the corner, was selected as the life recorder. Both of these two people could get 3 extra points in the college entrance examination. But the class beauty, Mary, kept staring at George. She was completely fascinated. It was obvious that the students still thought this was just an ordinary military training. They didn't take it seriously at all. Soon they were assigned to the dormitory. The boys and girls lived in an empty classroom respectively. Some ignorant boys even went to provoke the drill instructor, while the girls regarded the dormitory as their boudoir. But it was also understandable. After all, they were just some children. After that, they had to go to the playground for training every afternoon after school. Each student was also issued a gun, and these were all real guns used for training. Those students who were addicted to shooting games all day long were very excited at the beginning, and thought it was extremely novel. But after round of high-intensity physical training, everyone was fed up. All kinds of resistance emotions welled up. After the training ended and they returned to the dormitory, these students who were usually spoiled lay on the table and kept complaining. The school was implementing a closed management system at this time. If you didn't get permission, you couldn't even think about running out casually. That night, the school bully in the class didn't hand in his mobile phone before. He secretly took it out to play and came across a video online. In the video, soldiers shot and killed lions and tigers in the zoo. After everyone watched it, they all felt a chill in their hearts. One student whispered, "I heard that shooting wild beasts is a sign that a war is about to break out." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's discussion became more heated. It was so noisy that the top student couldn't calm down to study at all. Just then, George walked in. He happened to meet the top student who was about to go out. The top student complained that they were too noisy, and it affected his preparation for the college entrance examination. He also reported the school bully for hiding his mobile phone privately. Both of them harbored ill feelings towards each other. It seemed that they were about to fight any moment. George quickly called the two of them out and punished them by making them take out the trash. On the way, the two were still arguing non-stop because of their bickering. John, who was following behind, quickly stepped forward to mediate. But just then, John looked at the sky in shock. The impact instantly blew the three of them away. Looking at the sphere that was very close to them, they were all so frightened that they didn't know what to do. But at this moment, the two started fighting again. The top student was pushed to the ground. Unexpectedly, the sphere behind him suddenly moved and turned into a monster covered with tentacles. The monster lifted the top student into the air with its tentacles. John and the school bully were terrified. They could only watch helplessly as the top student struggled desperately there. Finally, he was swallowed whole by the monster. Just as the monster was about to attack John, George arrived in time and saved him. The monster then turned back into a sphere and became motionless. The two of them, still in a state of shock, were taken to the army that night. The commander seriously warned them that they must keep the secret well. They must never tell anyone what happened tonight. The situation was critical now, and there should be no more unnecessary panic. After returning to the dormitory, facing the questions from their classmates, they could only lie and say that the top student had asked for leave and gone home. The two of them sat on the bed, feeling uneasy all the time. In the following days, the students continued to train normally according to the training plan. On this day, the instructors suddenly received an urgent order from their superiors. They were required to teach these students how to use guns in the shortest possible time. It seemed that the urgency of the situation had exceeded everyone's imagination, so the students' next training content was to repeatedly disassemble and assemble guns, and practice how to shoot steadily. Talented students like Nara quickly mastered the usage method. Mary also worked very hard and didn't want to let George down, so her progress was particularly remarkable. After this extremely cruel training like in hell, everyone had a basic understanding of guns. Next, they were going to the shooting range for live-fire drills, but this action almost cost these students their lives. Walking on the street, the students found that it was terrifyingly quiet around. Not a single person could be seen. George told them to keep quiet. In fact, before the disaster struck, the government had already transferred the citizens to the shelters. Everyone continued to march towards the shooting range. They were completely unaware that a mysterious sphere had fallen nearby. After arriving at the shooting range, the instructor informed them that ordinary bullets would be useless against the enemies they would encounter in the future. Only a kind of bullet called DU could kill the enemies. That was depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition. But the number of such bullets wasn't large. The students didn't have time to ask who the enemies were exactly. They were pulled to carry out shooting training. At this moment, the scene of his classmate being killed by the monster kept lingering in John's mind. He was filled with sorrow. It wasn't until Nara, whom he had a crush on, came to ask with concern that he snapped out of his contemplation. In this way, they carried out a whole day of free shooting practice, and basically mastered the tricks of shooting. On the way back, George, who was leading the team, felt that the atmosphere around was unusual. The street was full of densely packed bomb craters. He quickly told the team to stop, asking everyone to rest on the spot for 10 minutes. He himself took instructor Jack to check the situation ahead. Not long after, the head teacher found that 2 students were missing from the team. He quickly took the monitor to search around. Just then, the monitor saw a gun on the ground. When she picked up the gun, she unexpectedly found a severed hand hanging on the gun. This terrifying scene instantly made her emotional breakdown. She screamed at the top of her lungs. The head teacher and other students rushed over when they heard the scream. Seeing the scene in front of them, everyone was stunned. The head teacher looked at the blood-stained shoes on the ground. He stood up and wanted to step forward to find out what was going on. John pulled him from behind, reminding him that there might be danger, but the head teacher wanted to figure out what had happened to the students. He walked forward slowly, step by step. Finally, John couldn't help but tell the truth about the top student's death. At this time, the head teacher also saw the bodies all over the place in front. He shouted hoarsely for the students to run. A large group of monsters were rushing towards them frantically. The head teacher quickly picked up the gun and started shooting. However, it was of no use at all. There were simply too many monsters. The students were all stunned by the terrifying scene in front of them. It wasn't until the head teacher was pierced by the tentacles of the monster they truly realized how dangerous the outside world was. An instructor arrived in time and urged the classmates to run for their lives, but he was only able to fire a few shots before his head was cut off by the tentacles of the monster. Witnessing 2 people losing their lives right in front of their eyes, the students finally realized what was going on and started running around. A large group of monsters were chasing closely behind them. Some students, in a panic, took refuge in the building without thinking. But what was even worse was that this place also couldn't escape the attack of the monsters. Just as the monsters were about to pounce on the students, George appeared in time to offer help. On the other side of the building, 2 monsters wrapped their tentacles around a student's leg. His companion tried his best to hold him back, to prevent him from being dragged away by the monsters. At the critical moment, Jack fired the gun decisively and killed the monster, successfully saving them. And outside the building, 2 female students were still being frantically chased by the monsters. In a panic, they took refuge in a telephone booth. The glass door temporarily blocked the monsters, but in the panic, they accidentally pressed the alarm button. The alarm sound resounded all around in an instant. The nearby monsters were all attracted. Under the fierce impact of the monsters, the glass quickly developed cracks. The 2 girls closed their eyes in despair. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire rang out. It turned out that George had come. With his continuous shooting, the monsters around were basically cleared away. The instructor stepped forward to take them away. but he didn't notice that there was still a monster hiding above. Just as the monster pounced down, Nara arrived in time and shot the monster dead. The hard training on weekdays finally played a crucial role at this moment, but they didn't have time to rest at all. The most urgent thing was to find the other students who had gotten separated. On the other side, the students who ran to the garage couldn't escape the attack of the monsters either. The monster stretched out its tentacles and tripped a student to the ground, then it pounced on his face. The boy desperately grabbed the tentacles of the monster. He shouted at the top of his lungs for his companion to shoot, but at that time, the two boys were completely terrified. Their minds went blank. They even forgot how to shoot at the critical moment. Fortunately, Mary was calm enough and stepped forward to shoot decisively. She hit the monster accurately, and temporarily diffused the crisis. At the same time, the two students that everyone had been looking for everywhere sneaked into the supermarket. They knew nothing about what was happening outside. When the monster appeared in front of them, these two guys who knew nothing actually reached out to grab it. Unexpectedly, the monster suddenly pounced on them. Fortunately, the gun in their hands blocked the monster's attack, so no major disaster occurred. How could they know? The thing that looked soft in front of them was actually a man-eating demon. The monster chased the two of them frantically in the supermarket. In a critical moment, the boy opened the freezer door to block the monster's attack. Then he took the opportunity to lock the monster inside. Unexpectedly, the monster that had been lively just now gradually quieted down. Finally, it became motionless. Not long after, the surviving students gathered together again. Several of their companions lost their lives in the first encounter with the monsters. The students were really frightened by today's experience. At this time, George revealed the reason for training them. If it really came to the day when the entire army was killed in action, they would have to become the last line of defense to protect their homeland. As soon as he finished speaking, a strange sound came from behind. The instructor signaled the students to quickly get ready for defense. He himself went to check the situation, and told the students to stay where they were, and to shoot immediately once they saw the monsters. George approached carefully. When he found out that it was a person, he quickly shouted for everyone not to shoot, but the gunshot still rang out. It turned out that a terrified short-haired girl pulled the trigger, and the people who came were exactly the two students who had left the team without permission. Fortunately, the bullet didn't hurt anyone. When they returned to the school no longer had the lively scene of the past. The students from other classes looked at them with an astonished look. They had no idea what they had gone through. After returning to the classroom, everyone jointly submitted an application to resist the order. They were just a group of students who were originally preparing for the college entrance examination, and didn't want to lose their lives because of this. All the classmates in the class agreed. Only Charlie objected. It turned out that he couldn't bear to give up the opportunity of getting extra points in the college entrance examination. He was afraid of death, and wanted everyone to stay with him. The school bully kicked him. There was also a girl who wanted to go home, and she knelt down and begged bitterly. Only then did Charlie reluctantly agree. So the monitor ran to find George, and handed her the application that everyone wanted to go home. However, George's attitude was extremely tough. He said firmly that even if they went home, they couldn't avoid the attack of the spheres, and the government had already transferred the people to the shelters. They were already soldiers now and had to continue to stay in the school to participate in the training. The classmates were almost driven crazy when they heard this. Several boys planned to sneak out at night, but they were caught and brought back in less than 2 minutes. All the classmates in the class also had bad luck, and were forced to do additional training. But this didn't make them give up the idea of running away. The next day, they began to tell the students from other classes about the terrifying things they had encountered outside, trying to spread a panic mood in this way, and inciting other students to resist with them. Soon the sentry posts set up by the school were almost breached. The huge impact force knocked the crowd to the ground. Everyone looked towards the center filled with smoke. The sphere was beating like a heart. The instructor, who sensed something abnormal, quickly picked up his gun and approached carefully. Suddenly, he heard the roaring sound of some kind of creature ahead. He shouted with all his might, telling the students to run quickly. But it was all too late. In the blink of an eye, a large group of monsters poured out of the sphere. They pounced on the crowd frantically. The number of monsters was so large that it was impossible to count. Bullets simply couldn't stop their advance. It wasn't until the students witnessed the instructor being killed by the monsters with their own eyes that they panicked. They started running around in all directions. The campus instantly turned into a living hell. Both students and instructors were hardly spared. Either their limbs were severed by the monsters or their bodies were pierced. In order to cover the students' evacuation, the instructors fell one after another in a pool of blood. What was even worse was that more spheres fell down one after another. Seeing that the situation was completely out of control, the officer with the highest rank on the scene actually abandoned the students and tried to drive away to save his own life, but the next second, the monsters pounced on the car window. He was so frightened that he overturned the car. In the end, he couldn't escape the fate of death. The scene became more and more chaotic. The school bully was also stunned by the scene in front of him. At this moment, however, Nara behaved completely differently from the others. She picked up the rifle that had fallen on the ground. She could accurately kill a monster with each shot, and killed a lot of monsters. George was also desperately protecting the students' evacuation, but at this time, more spheres kept falling. Fortunately, most of the students successfully took refuge in the teaching building. They quickly moved desks and chairs to block the main door. There were all monsters outside now. It was only a matter of time before it was breached. Under the organization of the instructor, they rushed back to the dormitory and picked up their own weapons. At this time, it was no longer possible to stay in the school. They could only desperately run towards the two military vehicles outside. That was their only hope of survival. Soon, George and Jack rushed out and fired their guns to suppress the monsters. The students quickly took action when they heard the signal. They were divided into two teams according to the plan. They climbed onto the truck one by one in an orderly manner. Now they became the only remaining group of survivors in the school. The monsters that heard the sound instantly swarmed towards the side. At this time, a girl was so frightened that she lost her wits. She stared at the shot-down airplane in the sky, and stood there in a daze with a look of despair on her face. The time was extremely urgent and there was no room for any delay. George quickly handed her hand to the student in the car. Then he rushed to start the truck, but the girl accidentally fell down when she was about to climb onto the truck, and also sprained her foot. George didn't notice this scene and had already started the truck. The classmates in the car were extremely anxious. They desperately reached out their hands to try to grab their companion. Unfortunately, they were a step too late. The next second, a monster pounced on the girl. George saw this scene and wanted to get off the car to save her, but he was stopped by Jack, who rushed over. Jack said eagerly, "If we don't leave quickly now, all the students will die here." George had no choice but to watch, as the students were brutally eaten by the monsters. At this moment, there were monsters everywhere on the campus, and not a single living person could be seen anymore. However, it wasn't just the school that was invaded by the spheres. The entire Seoul was plunged into a deep crisis. It felt as if the end of humanity was really about to come. The people who were lucky enough to survive could only desperately run towards the military base. At least it was relatively safer there, but no one knew when a monster secretly climbed into the cab of vehicle number 2, causing the vehicle to lose control and roll over. The monster then crawled towards the carriage. The students in the carriage were panic-stricken when they saw it. They quickly fired their guns. Finally, they managed to kill the monster, but they then found that the instructors in the cab had unfortunately died. Mary's abdomen was also scratched in this accident. She simply couldn't walk to the destination. The sky was gradually getting dark. The bullets had all been used up. The group had to decide to find a place nearby to rest for the night. On the other side, George drove the truck and successfully arrived at the military base. He found that vehicle number 2 hadn't arrived yet, and immediately understood that something unexpected must have happened. So he went to find the commander, and applied to drive back to look for those students. But unexpectedly, the commander was heartless. He didn't care about the lives and deaths of those students at all. He also said viciously, if George dared to act without permission, he would be shot. At this time, the students of Team 2 finally managed to find a house to take shelter in temporarily. Now they were not only short of food, but also had teammates who were seriously injured. The situation was extremely critical. Fortunately, they found a first aid kit and clean water in the house. A girl wearing glasses found a pack of instant noodles in the kitchen. She didn't tell the others, secretly went outside the house and ate it. After eating, the girl with glasses was about to leave, but she suddenly found that a monster in the distance was staring at her. She was so frightened that she let out a loud scream. Her companions heard the sound and quickly ran out to meet her, but they had no bullets left now, so they could only hide in the house. The monster couldn't get in through the door, so it actually climbed onto the roof. It seemed that it was quite smart. John noticed the movement in the chimney. He quickly told everyone to move to another place, so everyone ran from the living room to the room. The monster was crashing into the door outside, and the situation was extremely critical. At the same time, George ignored the warning from his superior. He resolutely decided to drive back to look for the separated students. When the classmates at the base knew about it, they all clamored to go together. Only the timid Charlie chose to stay. On the other side, the students in the room hid until the evening. The monster showed no sign of leaving at all. But just then, the companions found that Mary's wound had festered, and she had a high fever. The situation was extremely dangerous. They had to go out immediately to seek help. John suggested that everyone run to the nearby warehouse, drive away the truck inside and leave here. Everyone thought this was a good idea, but now the monster was blocking the door, and they couldn't get out at all. John said that he would climb out of the window first, to see if he could find some tools to come back and pry open the window. Then John tiptoed into the warehouse. Unexpectedly, the monster had extremely sharp hearing. it quietly followed John and also entered the warehouse. It took John a great deal of effort to find the pliers. He was about to leave. Inadvertently, he looked up. He saw the monster through the rearview mirror of the truck. Suddenly, his heart was pounding with fear, and he started running outside as fast as he could. When he ran back to the room, the monster also climbed into the living room through the chimney. At this time, everyone found that the monster seemed to be extremely sensitive to sound, so in order to escape safely, they put a disc into the DVD player and turned the volume up to the maximum, silently hoping that they could keep the monster in the living room to buy themselves a chance to escape. Soon everyone climbed out of the window. However, just as everyone was running desperately towards the warehouse, the DVD player in the room suddenly malfunctioned. The monster heard the movement outside and immediately climbed out of the chimney. Everyone was terrified when they saw this scene and ran towards the warehouse as fast as they could. Finally, they closed the door of the warehouse at the last moment, but just as John was about to start the truck and escape, he found that it was a manual transmission truck, and he didn't know how to drive it at all. The girl next to him volunteered to drive, but John didn't quite believe in her driving skills. The two of them started to fight over it. During the pushing and shoving, the car key was thrown into the corner. John couldn't reach it no matter how hard he tried. At the same time, the students were horrified to find that the monster was trying to break in through the ceiling. The situation became extremely critical. A boy put forward a somewhat cruel suggestion. He said that maybe they should give up on the injured Mary. In this way, at least the others could run on their two legs. Maybe there would still be a slim chance of escape. The classmates fell into silence when they heard this. No one had the heart to abandon their companion, so the other person came up with another idea, that was, send someone out to lure the monster away, and the others would take the opportunity to run away quickly. This proposal was approved by everyone, so they decided to draw lots to determine who would go to lure the monster away. Whoever drew the shortest chopstick would go. Soon everyone showed their chopsticks. Only John kept his chopstick hidden and didn't take it out. Classmate Bob saw this situation and didn't say anything. He resolutely broke his own chopstick and then stood up. In fact, only John knew in his heart that he was the one who had drawn the shortest chopstick. After Bob went out, he banged on the iron bucket vigorously, making a loud noise. It didn't take long for him to successfully lure the monster away. The others took the opportunity to get the car key. They quickly drove away from this dangerous place. Bob watched as the truck drove away smoothly. He felt a sense of relief in his heart and let out a sigh. But the monster soon caught up again. Bob was forced into a dead end not long after running. Just when he despaired and thought he was surely going to die, unexpectedly, John ran back again. He didn't abandon Bob and run for his own life. John suddenly remembered that the monster was afraid of low temperature, so he quickly picked up the liquid nitrogen sprayer and sprayed it at the monster, finally froze the monster to death. Just as the two were about to leave, another monster pounced on them. Fortunately, George arrived in time and saved them. Nara reacted quickly and immediately shot and killed the monster. After going through countless hardships and dangers, they were finally saved. Everyone was reunited again. After returning to the base, the relationship among everyone became even closer. Even the school bully, who was usually arrogant and overbearing, became much more subdued. The superior knew about George's unauthorized action, but considering that he had brought the students back safely, so he wasn't punished. Since then, the students only carried out some simple training every day, but soon new trouble came. The commander ordered the students to go to the front line to eliminate those monsters. After the battle plan was finalized, the commander brought George in front of the students. He told everyone the upcoming battle arrangements without reservation. The students were stunned when they heard that they were going to the battlefield tomorrow. Although George felt full of reluctance in his heart, he could only helplessly carry out the order issued by his superior. After returning to the dormitory, everyone's mood was extremely heavy. They could only write a suicide note as required. It could be regarded as giving an account of their own lives. The next day, the students were divided into two teams and set off. Each team leader received an instrument that could detect monsters. They decided to launch an operation to encircle and eliminate the monsters. If they followed the usual way of searching for monsters, there simply wouldn't be enough time. So everyone unanimously decided to use the school they were in as the center point of the explosion, find a way to attract all the monsters here, and then deal with them all at once. Then the students took action quickly. Some students were responsible for finding the bombs left behind by the troops. They tied the bombs together with the specially made bullets and placed the bombs in various corners of the teaching building. Some other students went to the broadcasting room to prepare to attract the monsters' attention with a loud sound. Several other students climbed onto the roof, closely monitoring every move of the monsters. However, when the bombs were only half placed, the students on sentry duty on the roof found that the monsters were moving towards the direction of the urban shelter. George could only issue the operation order in advance. The students who received the instruction immediately turned on the school's broadcast. The students downstairs also quickly triggered the car alarms. In an instant, a huge noise resounded throughout the urban area. The monsters, upon hearing the sound, began to rush towards the school frantically, but at this time, the bombs hadn't been fully placed yet. George took over the task of placing the bombs from the students, and gave Jack a look, hinting that he should take the students to the meeting point first, while he himself stayed behind to continue completing the task of placing the bombs. How could the students bear to leave George? They couldn't bear to leave George, who was like a family member to them, alone, but George roared loudly and ordered them to leave. The students could only choose to trust George. More and more monsters rushed towards the school. There even appeared a huge monster. It seemed that it was directing the actions of the other monsters. After a while, the students all arrived at the pre-arranged location. Looking at the groups of monsters rushing into the school, everyone's hearts were clenched tightly. They were silently worried about George. At this time, the monsters had already rushed into the teaching building. George had also successfully completed the placement of the bombs. When he was about to evacuate, he found that the monsters were rushing up the stairs. He quickly ran towards the other side of the stairs. Unexpectedly, this side was also blocked by the monsters, and there were also monsters drilling in from upstairs. George was completely in a desperate situation. There was really no other way, so he could only hide in a classroom first. On the other side, the students waited for a long time. They still didn't see George's figure. They were all extremely anxious. Just then, the walkie-talkie rang, and it was George's voice. He told the students to detonate the bombs, and he also said that he had successfully escaped. But Mary immediately saw through George's lie. George didn't hide it anymore. He frankly told the students that he couldn't escape anymore. If the bombs weren't detonated now, all the efforts that everyone had made before would be in vain. There was no other choice. So the students still pressed the detonation button. After George perished together with the monsters, Jack was also sent back to the army because of his injury, and the students continued to devote themselves to the task of eliminating the monsters. After more than a month of arduous fighting, they gradually mastered the skills to survive difficultly in the apocalyptic world. They went out to fight against the monsters during the day, and collected some living supplies by the way. After returning to the camp at night, everyone distributed the supplies. Together, the days repeated like this day by day. However, a piece of news broke this peace. They heard the notice of the cancellation of the college entrance examination through the radio. Everyone's mood was quite complicated. They were both very shocked, and had a faint sense of relief in their hearts. Everyone thought that since the college entrance examination was cancelled, there was no need to train desperately for extra points in the college entrance examination anymore, so they unanimously decided to go back to Seoul to look for their parents. For most of the students, although the cancellation of the college entrance examination was a big change, it didn't have too serious an impact. But for Charlie, it was like a bolt from the blue. He had been desperately participating in the training all along, just for getting extra points in the college entrance examination. He even recorded that he had killed 37 monsters. Now that the college entrance examination was suddenly announced to be cancelled, he who had been longing to enter university, began to have an extremely unstable mental state. On the way back to Seoul, the delirious Charlie picked up a newspaper. It was clearly written on it that the college entrance examination would be held as scheduled. He was almost crazy with excitement. He quickly found Mary, the goddess in his heart, and wanted to share this so-called good news with her. But Mary saw that this newspaper was an old one from a few years ago. Out of kindness and concern, Mary comforted Charlie softly a few words. Unexpectedly, Charlie didn't listen at all. Instead, he thought that Mary was deliberately targeting him. The two of them then started to quarrel. Charlie, who had lost control of his emotions, pushed Mary angrily. Mary couldn't dodge in time. Her head hit the table and she fainted immediately. Charlie was immediately flustered. He originally wanted to call for help, but when he looked at Mary lying on the ground, he also remembered the scene of being rejected by Mary before. His face instantly turned ferocious and he immediately kissed her. The school bully who was on patrol saw this scene, and was instantly filled with anger. He immediately kicked Charlie flying. Then he turned around and anxiously called out to the unconscious Mary. Charlie was afraid that his evil deeds would be discovered. Taking advantage of the fact that the school bully's attention was all on Mary, he secretly picked up a stone and attacked the school bully. Then there was a burst of gunfire. The others rushed over quickly when they heard it, but they only saw Mary lying on the ground, and the shocking pool of blood on the ground. Then they saw Charlie, who was all wet, walking over from the seaside. When he was asked what had happened, Charlie made up a lie and claimed that he had encountered an attack by monsters. It was the monsters that knocked Mary unconscious. The school bully was unfortunately dragged into the sea. The companions were skeptical. They picked up the detector and checked. Unexpectedly, there were really many targets around. A large number of monsters were quickly approaching in their direction. The situation was so urgent that they didn't have time to grieve. They quickly took Mary and moved to a safe place. Mary woke up on the way, but due to the head injury, she couldn't remember exactly what had happened. She just vaguely felt that Charlie's behavior was very suspicious. Soon they took refuge in an abandoned school, and Charlie walked alone into the rain and started talking to himself. In a trance, he seemed to see the ghost of the school bully, coming to claim his life. His spirit completely collapsed. Just as Charlie was about to return to the classroom, he saw that Mary was talking with everyone. He firmly believed that Mary was reporting his act of killing. In fact, the classmates were discussing their future plans. They were envisioning a wonderful life after the monsters were completely eliminated. At this time, everyone remembered that Charlie was still outside. Bob was about to go out to look for him. Suddenly, the crazy Charlie rushed into the classroom with a gun and started shooting wildly. He who had lost his mind almost killed everyone. Just as he was about to kill John, the short-haired girl behind him decisively shot and killed Charlie. In the end, only 4 people out of the original team of 20 were lucky enough to survive. They successfully avoided the cruel hunting of the monsters, but they didn't expect that they would finally fall under the guns of their former companions, who they had been together with day and night. It was really lamentable. Less than 2 months after this incident happened, humans successfully invented a new weapon. They eliminated most of the monsters on the Earth in just 2 weeks. Life quickly returned to normal, but when John was sitting in the examination room for the college entrance examination, he couldn't see those comrades in arms who had shared weal and woe with him anymore. After a short period of thinking, John slowly dropped the pen in his hand, stood up, and left a blank examination paper. He walked straight out of the examination room. The film ends here. The ending of the whole drama is extremely disappointing. A group of people fought desperately and finally died at the hands of their comrades. There are no particularly outstanding student roles either. However, the plot of the first 6 episodes is still good. It would be even better if the ending wasn't so rushed, and some settings are really exasperating. There was time to draw lots in the garage, but no time to quickly take out the car key. And why were only senior high school third-year students recruited into the army? Is it because they are easy to deceive? A group of students became excellent marksmen after just a few days of learning. Also, couldn't they practice target shooting on the school playground? It's just to forcefully push forward the plot. The origin and whereabouts of the alien monsters weren't clearly explained either. However, the special effects are quite exquisite. There's no need to watch the original film, just watch my commentary. Well, today's video ends here. If you have other opinion, you are welcome to leave a message in the comments section. See you in the next video.